everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Divorce and Separation Coach podcast. Today, we're talking about blended families. It can be a wonderful experience to bring two families together. It can also be incredibly difficult. So, we're going to be talking through all of that. And this is a topic that's very dear to my heart because I have a blended family and I've experienced the ups and the downs, the challenges and the wonderful elements as well. But to discuss this more and to go beyond just my story, I've invited Al Huntoon. And the idea today is to really pick Al's brain because he holds a master in social work and he's got over 30 years experience in family services and mental health. Al spent nearly a decade as a custody mediator, and he's a co-parenting specialist. So he's helped countless families to navigate shared parenting, blended families, and all other kinds of major life transitions. Thank you so much for joining us, Al.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm really looking forward to this topic. As I said, there's a personal element to it for me as well. But I'd love to hear from you as the expert, and based on your experience, what are some of the common challenges that parents face when they start blending their families after divorce?
Well, I want to respond to something you just said because it resonates with me. Because I grew up in an extended blended family.
Yeah,
I have grandparents who were step grandparents, so step
yeah,
grandfathers, two step grandmothers, and a blended family kind of throughout my extended family.
hmm,
And so, as a child, I grew up with that. Just that was my normal. Um,
yes,
and it really had an effect on shaping how I think about families.
hmm,
A very inclusive notion of how family is supposed to look. And
yeah,
I didn't know when I was a kid. And it took me a long time to figure out what those relationships were because
yeah,
by and large, they were pretty seamless.
yeah,
So that set the standard for me in thinking about it. And it was interesting as a kid, you don't see everything that grown-ups do.
no,
But I didn't see many challenges until I uh I got divorced
hmm,
and got in a relationship and got married. And so I was in a blended family myself.
yeah,
And in addition to that, I have a biological son and an
hmm,
adopted daughter.
hmm,
My family is very thoroughly blended.
yes, over several
So
generations.
yes, for several generations. So I've really lived this, and also I have, as you've mentioned, you referred to my qualifications as experience. I have professional experience with it as well. So I have that perspective. So I think, from both of those perspectives, I think there's three main challenges that
Yeah,
people have when they're blending families. And the first challenge is logistical,
mhm.
right?
I've experienced that.
Yes. And that has to do with blending households. And that broadly applies to lots of situations where people come together from separate households into one household.
Yeah.
But it's made more complicated by the complications that children bring to life, um,
Mhm.
and their care. And so there's schedules that have to be accommodated, children when they're school age, getting them up, getting them breakfast, making lunches, getting them ready. That's a very busy morning schedule for lots of
Yeah.
parents. And then somebody comes into that schedule and they have had maybe a more leisurely or focused
Yeah.
morning. And, I think of reading the paper, but I'm probably the last person on earth who actually reads the paper. But checking world events or exercising or something like that, and all of a sudden that's out the window because you're in a household that's very busy in the morning and very
Yeah.
focused and structured. So that's a big thing is routines. I think just of course coordinating the space, but also finances. Children are a heavy financial burden. People don't often think about that, but they really are. And so when you bring another person into the family and you're integrating their the kind of the financial aspects of the household, it can be very lopsided.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something that people can really attend to. And that's the least of it. That's the least the challenge, the lowest challenge. There's the relational challenges, right, of forming these new relationships. And what exactly is the step parent going to be to the children, right?
Yeah.
The step parent is the romantic partner of what I think of as a natural parent. I often see biological parent, but as an adoptive parent, that just
Not
rubs me the
necessarily.
wrong
Yeah.
way. So I think of the natural parent or the legal parent. And then those two people have a relationship that's
Yeah.
based around, romance and partnership. But, what's the relationship of the step parent to the children in
Mhm.
regard to, the care responsibilities, parenting responsibilities, because those are different.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So I think that relationship, and there may be step siblings as well. Um, or half siblings,
Yeah.
and how does that work? So that's a complication. And then of course there's the emotional part where children, if you know if it was an intact family and then there's separation through divorce or whatever, or death, and incidentally, I like to mention, like, the word step, it has a Germanic origin and it means orphaned. So a stepchild is an orphaned child.
Yeah.
And the step parent is the parent of an orphan. Well,
Mhm.
at one time, that was the most common way. That's what happened to my
Yeah.
mother.
Because that's how marriages ended, right? Only through
Right.
death.
Yeah, through death. And so that, of course, there's grief and loss that the children experience because of that. But that changed over time and became more, in terms of separation and divorce. And so there may be, grief over the loss of that relationship of the intact family. And now there's many families who are, parents who are never living in the same household.
True.
Right. And so then I think there can be some anxiety from children about the change,
Yeah.
right? Children really benefit from stability. And so they can experience a lot of anxiety of what is a major, like a sea change in their life with someone coming in. And so those are the really the three big challenges that I see that I think are important for people to keep in mind as they're forming these new families.
Yeah. And I mean, all three of them really resonate with me, but it really depends on every scenario. I've got clients who, one of the two is widowed, the other one isn't, is
Mhm.
divorced. Sometimes one of the two was never married, but the other one has children. There's all kinds of different setups. I mean, in my situation, my new partner had children with his previous wife. I have children from my previous marriage, so we were blending children and parents,
Hmm.
and his children live with their mom. So it's only an alternate weekend kind of situation as well. So that makes it even more complicated. And we had to align parenting plans so that the weekends were,
Yes.
coincided. The logistics can get really complicated with holidays, with weekends, all of that. It gets really difficult. And then, the emotional side of things I think is really one of the most difficult bits because some people easily fall into that role as a step parent or as a step sibling, and others really struggle. And I think it has a lot to do with
Hmm.
the backdrop of how they ended up in this situation. If they've lost their other parent or how acrimonious the divorce was. There's a lot of issues with split loyalties. How do you help people who have these kind of challenges with children who feel like they have to kind of take sides between two parents?
Well, the loyalty issue, I think, is a huge one for children, and it can really be exacerbated by parents.
Yeah.
Um, and and I want to kind of return to something you were talking about, and which I alluded to, is really the diversity of families now.
Yeah.
There, in my parents' time, divorce was rare.
Mhm.
My father's parents got divorced, and that's how I ended up with step grandfather and step grandmother. Um, but that was very rare.
Yeah.
Uh, and so now there's all these kinds of families, as we said, but also, different family makeups. I mean, I think, I don't know about where you are, but here in the States, gay marriage was recently legalized, right? And so there are families with, same-sex parents, and they separate just like anyone
Hmm.
else. So
Hmm.
that causes, additional complications and additional diversity. So much diversity makes it hard to make suggestions, advice, prescriptions
Yeah,
about what blended families should do because there's
that's
so
true.
many different kinds.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And
Yeah.
and actually, one of the things I wanted to discuss with you is what you were kind of alluding to is, the relationship with the co-parents as well. In cases where it isn't through death that you end blending the families, it's
Hmm.
actually a three-way or a four-way suddenly in terms of
Hmm.
the co-parenting relationship. There's the two romantic partners, but the exes are also usually part of the equation. And how do you work through all of those different parenting styles, values, priorities for their children, decisions? It can get really complicated. I know that I certainly had a number of challenges with regards to that. What is your view in terms of how the other parents should be integrated into that relationship?
One thing I mean, again, that's and then we're just adding in another complication, right? The parenting is tough, and then
Even the best of
so
cases, isn't it?
just on its own is
Mm.
tough. And then you add this, co-parenting, these parenting from separate households adds another level of complication. And then we're introducing other parents parenting in a certain way with their own
Yeah,
parenting styles and notions about parenting, and so raises it to another level.
yeah,
um, I think understanding that it is very, very difficult to integrate, you know all these family members into the child's extended family, right?
yeah,
It's the child is at the center. You take a child-centric view of the whole thing, and I think that's the key for the parents is to see that for the child, the other co-parent and the step parent and the step siblings are part of that child's family, right? And if you want your child to do well, if you're thinking about your child's well-being, then you're thinking about your child's family. It's not,
yeah,
people are not, as you mentioned, as a social worker, I'm a systems thinker. That child is in a system,
yeah,
and that system helps define the identity of that child. And
yeah,
so, if you're looking from that perspective, you're going to think about your relationship and how it's affecting that child, your
yeah,
relationship, your co-parent, and the co-parent's partner. And so I think that's the number one thing to try and do is be child focused, child centric in your thinking. The other thing is to realize that negativity and conflict are infectious.
mhm,
And so when you have a negative relationship with your co-parent or conflictual relationship with your co-parent, that is going to infect, it's going to spread,
mhm.
and
And
it's
the
going
kids can
to
feel it, and it makes everybody less
it's
comfortable for
going to
sure.
it may right it puts people more on edge, less what I think of as kind of like inner resources to respond to difficult situations.
Mhm.
And there's going to be plenty of those with children. And so, if your patience is kind of tapped, if the well is low, then that's going to affect your relationship with the children. And I've seen it in my own life.
Yeah,
And so then that means you've got to put some work into the relationship. And I think that's true of the step parent as well. If the
hmm,
step parent wants to have the do the best in terms of effective relationships, then the step parent should attend to the relationship with the co-parent, and
exactly.
be sensitive to that. And what often happens is people form these new relationships, they bring a new partner in, and all of a sudden there's two of you, you've got a team, and one of the other co-parent.
Yeah.
And they can have a tendency to feel like they're being outnumbered, right?
Yes. Or replaced even.
Yeah, right. Or replaced. Yes, absolutely. That's a good point. And so being sensitive to that, talking about the role of the step parent, um, and and trying to reinforce that the relationship with the co-parent is very important and not it isn't, there's got to be work put into it and thought put into it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is a little bit harder than when it's, a traditional family. But my experience has definitely been that the relationship between the three or four co-parents is really important. And one of the highlights of my experience was, the mother of my stepchildren once coming to see me, giving me a gift for my birthday, which really surprised me. And she said, thank you so much for taking such good care of my babies. And just the fact that she wasn't seeing me as competition. She was seeing me as a relay when her
Mhm.
children were with their dad. There was another mother figure there. And she really understood from a child-centered perspective, as you were saying, that the kids were gaining a parental figure and somebody else who loves them and cares for them. That's not always the case. A lot of people do feel threatened or replaced, especially if they
Mhm.
haven't met someone new. So it can be really difficult, this kind of enlarged co-parenting
Yeah,
relationship.
yeah. Yeah. Well, something that you said just really resonates for me, and I just had a kind of a principle that I always brought to it, is that the more people who love your child and the more people that your child loves, the
Yeah,
better off they are.
for sure. It's a richness in their life. So
Hmm.
now there's another aspect that I wanted to touch upon with you, and it's relating back to a lot of what we see, in Disney movies and just in the media in general with the evil step parent, right? And
Oh,
the
yeah.
child really rejecting them, and in most cases, the step parent is a villain of some sort and
Hmm.
deserves that hate. But how important, and I guess we know how important it is, but how can the step parent ease their way into the child's life and try and avoid that kind of rejection? Are there any tips that you can share for people in that situation?
Well, it's basically going from Snow White to the Brady Bunch, and I'm dating myself, I know. But Snow White's stepmother tried to have her killed and then tried to poison her, right?
Yes.
And then we get to the Brady Bunch where the parents are trying really hard and they're doing really well to have a integrated family, where everyone gets along and respects each other. And I think that's the main thing I would say is respect, right?
Uh-huh.
If you can't if you can't be a cooperative, real close partner with the other co-parent, at least respect them in their role.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's true coming in for a new step parent or a new partner with the kids, is to
Mhm.
start out respecting them, respecting that they already have these relationships, that in order to form a relationship with them, you have to start where they are and take some time. And I think to really integrate blended families, the best thing that people can do is start with some really basic things. Eat their meals together,
Yeah.
right? When my kids were young, uh, every opportunity that we had, we ate 3 meals together. We
Yeah, I
had
love
on
that.
weekends, we had breakfast, lunch, and dinner together.
Yeah. Those are really
So
special moments.
yeah, I think that's where the kind of relaxed, conversation and things like that. That's where people can be more relaxed. So that's where I would start, is to think about how you can have shared meals. And then other shared experiences like, a game night, a movie night, an activity, on a regular basis, like,
Yeah.
go bowling or, uh, when my kids were younger, during the nicer weather in summer months, there's a very nice park 15, 20 minutes away, and we would go for there for picnics.
Oh, did
Uh,
we? It worked very
yeah,
well.
yes, that works very well. And then the kids are, you're outside. It's very easy to create a picnic lunch and to go
Yeah,
there, and you're out of the house in nature. And that can be, a really relaxed way to build a relationship. So
yeah.
my advice to a new step parent would be do that stuff.
Yes, I love that. And I guess there's an element of just respecting the child's pace as well. I mean,
Yes.
every time I've seen blended families struggle is because they've tried to rush things. The new
Mhm.
person moved in very fast and the children hadn't really warmed up to them yet, or they just sort of just imposed that new relationship on the children without giving them the time to process what was going on.
Yes. And I think the other thing is to be intentional about how much kind of care of the children and parental. So I think of the care of the children as parental chores, right? The younger kids are, the more parental chores there are.
Yeah,
And so are you going to share the parental chores with the natural, the legal parent, right? And to what extent?
yeah,
And so if you're going to, those are the responsibilities of a parent. If you're going to share
yeah,
the responsibilities, then what to what extent are you going to share the decisions, right? And discipline is a decision.
yes.
And so what kind of discipline are you going to use? I think it's important for parents in general to try to get on the same page for discipline and to understand how important discipline is and to use the same methods of discipline and to, if that's the kind of relationship you're having, and that's the kind of relationship I had with my wife, is to have the parental authority to discipline under the right situation, right?
Yeah. I think
Um,
that's a good point around discipline because it's already hard enough for two parents to agree on what the rules are and, where we let go and where we don't. When you have three that have to be on the same page, it's difficult. And then, if the child already has two parents and you're the step parent, the bonus parent, um, you do feel like you're not 100% entitled to impose rules or to discipline them because they actually have two parents who are there to do that. Yet, if you're living with that child, you're going to have to time step in and regulate things. So it can be a really difficult balance. Trying to keep everybody aligned and the child even respecting that source of authority as a legitimate source of authority. When they already have two parents.
yeah, alignment of parental styles is a huge issue between co-parents. It's an
Yeah,
issue that leads to people separating.
yeah, exactly. And it doesn't stop because they divorce. They often
Right.
think that's the end of that.
Right. Yes, being separated exacerbates it. It allows people the freedom to kind of, use their own parenting style. And so
Yeah,
the more well-aligned that people can get on parenting styles, and especially things like discipline, um, the better off they are. I think it is really the responsibility of the step parent to align themselves
mhm.
with the natural parent, with the legal parent in terms of the
Okay.
parenting style. That's my opinion. It's not like there's a lot of research around that, but that's my experience and my opinion is that if the step parent can make an effort to align themselves to the natural parent's parenting style,
Yeah,
right? Then the children are more likely to accept that parent's authority, which is a key thing to
there's
that.
consistent then across all their parents, parent
Yes.
figures. Yeah.
They're seeing that the step parent is kind of a surrogate for the parent then.
Hmm.
I think that's key.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mhm.
And avoid some of the resentment that, the step parent punished me when my parents wouldn't have punished me in that
Right.
context. And then that kind of
Right.
villain role comes back into play.
Yeah. And I think also then the parent can make it clear that we are acting in concert and the consistency and the stability in that does make it clear. And that's so important for children.
Absolutely. That's how they thrive. So,
Mhm.
so for people who are just starting to blend their families, Are there any kind of realistic expectations you would set just so, they don't think it's going to be the Brady Bunch overnight,
Yeah,
but they also don't turn into Snow White?
right. You don't want Snow White, that's for sure. I think the realistic expectation is that it's not going to be natural, that it's going to be hard, and if you want to do it to the best of your ability, it needs to be intentional, which means a lot of difficult conversations,
Yeah,
which people are just not, they're just not good at. Even me, have all this training and all this experience in conversation, having difficult conversations and negotiation and what, the like, and still, kind of sitting down, having a difficult conversation about an area that you could possibly have a conflict over, tension
yeah,
over, right? So that's what I would suggest is, first of all, understand that it isn't going to be a natural process.
yeah.
And people think about that. I I think a lot of people have that approach that it's just going to fall in line, and I'll just be a good, fun person to be around, and the kids will just like it.
Even
But
if you're well intentioned, it doesn't
right,
mean that it's also just going to all
right,
fall in place.
right. And the challenges we talked about at the beginning, if they keep those in mind, that there are going to be challenges, of the logistical, relational and emotional sort, right? That they need to be sensitive to and
Yeah.
attend to. I think that's going to be huge. And like you were saying, let the kids take the lead.
Hmm.
Um, you know, don't push things.
Yeah.
Uh, let them
And
come to you. Be sensitive to them, uh, be focused on them, and see how they're reacting to your
hmm
role, and
hmm
build it developmentally, organically.
hmm I like that. So it's a lot of work. It doesn't happen overnight, but it does, it is a journey. You have to accept that it's going to take time and that you have to let the children ease their way into it as well. Before we wrap up, Al, any other tips you would share with people who are just starting off on this journey?
Well, I just returned to something that you said, that, it can be a really beautiful thing. And, it's like so many other things that are really difficult, that if you can overcome the obstacles, you can really feel the satisfaction that comes with doing something very challenging.
Yeah.
And and one of the most rewarding things that happens to me is how my stepsons treat me, and how they tell me how much they appreciate me.
Yeah.
That's different when my children rarely tell me, right, that they're grateful for my role in their lives. They just take it for granted, as they should,
True.
right? As they should.
Yeah.
They're not that they completely lack gratitude, but I'm just their father. But for my
Yeah.
stepsons, they will make a point
Yeah.
of telling me what a valuable role I have in their lives. And man,
That's amazing.
that's rewarding.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, it's incredibly enriching for anybody. For the children, they have, as we said, an additional person loving them and caring for them. But for the step parents as well, you gain a child, you gain an influence in this little person's life, and you have a role to play in how they turn out. It's an amazing experience. It comes with its challenges, but I would definitely say that it's worth all the challenges that you're going to face because you end up in an absolutely wonderful, different family situation.
Hmm. Yeah. Like you've said several times, it's very enriching.
Yeah, I agreed. Thank you so much, Al. It was really nice to speak to you. Thanks for joining me today.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about something that's so close to my heart.